This is Library Nerds with Words, the podcast that gives you the word on all the cool, nerdy happenings at Peter White Public Library and the library universe beyond. From books and concerts to search engines and story times, the library nerds are in and ready to show you that being a nerd can be cool. Get ready, get set, get nerdy. Welcome back to Library Nerds with Words, the podcast that gives you the word on all the cool things going on at Peter White Public Library and the library universe beyond, straight from the people who know it best, library nerds. My name is Marty and I'm the adult programming coordinator for Peter White Public Library. For this second episode of Season 4 of the podcast, I'm going to do something a little special. On the second episode of our very first season, our special guest nerd was Andrea Ingmire, director of Peter White Public Library. In fact, Andrea was the very first guest nerd ever in the history of the podcast. Of course, things have changed a little since we recorded that episode. Just to give you an idea of what was going on back then, it was April of 2021, and we were just about a year into the global pandemic. All events at the library were virtual. The world was just learning a new verb, Zoom, and I was just about 6 months into my job as adult programming coordinator. Translation: I didn't know what I was doing really, including recording audio. You will notice a very distinct difference in the sound quality once we jump into our time machine. So let's hop into the Library Nerds with Words DeLorean, set our dial for April 5th, 2021, and see what happens. Welcome back to Library Nerds with Words, the podcast that gives you the word on everything that's happening at Peter White Public Library and the library universe beyond. My name is Marty and I'm the adult programming coordinator at Peter White Public Library. And if you haven't guessed it already, I'm a library nerd. On this week's episode, I'm visiting with Andrea Ingmire, director of Peter White Public Library. Basically, she's the library nerd in charge of all the other library nerds. Welcome, Andrea.
Thanks, Marty. I'm so happy to be here.
So, Andrea, we're so happy to have you on the podcast. And before you give us the lowdown on what's going on at Peter White Public Library this week, we have this little segment called
Word on the Nerd.
In this part of the podcast, I asked the Library Nerd of the Week to tell listeners a little about yourself and how you became a library nerd. So were libraries a big part of your childhood when you were growing up?
They were. I grew up in a very small town in northern Indiana called Fowler. I'm sure no one has ever heard of it. My mom and dad are both avid readers, so we spent a lot of time walking down to our small local library in town. It was about 6 blocks from my house, and I can still picture the walk. We made it a lot. One of my favorite childhood memories of my library is when I found out about V.C. Andrews. I'm sure everyone knows who V.C. Andrews is by reputation.
Yeah, she's been one of my friends for a long time.
Yes, it was quite scandalous that I wanted to read those trashy books. And my local librarians were not thrilled to give them to me. So I'd sneak into a corner and read them while I was at the library so I could get around the rules, which, is interesting to me now as a library director, because we take very seriously the responsibility that we have to patrons to allow them to take out whatever they need. So we don't make judgments based on what they're wanting to read. But back in the day, things weren't quite like that.
No, yeah. I had a few times where a librarian, I'd come up with a book and they'd go, I don't know if that's good for you. But oh boy, DC Andrews, yeah, I remember how scandalous she was back in the day. So
Yep.
wow.
I haven't read one of her books in years, so I don't know how it stands the test of time. But I really just, I don't have a desire to read her books anymore. But man, at the time, it really was something that just hit what I needed at the time, I guess.
Yeah, I remember getting flowers in the attic and then passing it around to my friends going, you gotta read this, you gotta read this.
I know.
And now, yeah.
Good times.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, that's one fellow library nerd to the other. DC Andrews, that was, I mean, she was back in the day. She was really something. I think she got a lot of people interested in reading. So that's a good thing, no matter what. So
it absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So several years ago, I've been a library director now for almost 15 years. And several years ago, we were cleaning out my grandparents' house. They had moved to Florida, and my grandpa's one of those guys who had, 6 buildings around town that was just filled to the brim with all of his stuff. And as we were sorting through some of his certificates, I found a certificate from the library that he had served on the library board for 20 years. And that's the maximum term for the state of Indiana. So that was kind of like, oh, wow, this goes deeper than I thought.
It's in your blood. It's deep in your blood. Wow. Wow. I don't necessarily have that kind of genetics in me, but that's all right. That's all right. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, that's the word on Peter White Public Library's chief library nerd, Andrea. All right. And now it's time for the word. So, Andrea, what's the word you want to share with us today about Peter White Public Library?
Well, Marty, there's always really great programming going on at the library. So I thought today I'd talk about some other things. We have summer reading, and spring is here. It doesn't quite look like it today. It did last week really well, but all of that is right around the corner. And so while we're starting to look ahead and think about summer and spring, my mind always goes to gardens and growing things and some exciting projects we've got coming up this spring, summer. We will be putting in a new sprinkler system on the grounds. The sprinkler system that we have currently installed is 20 years old. And several of most of our beds out front weren't installed when this original sprinkler system was. So we're watering sidewalks instead of plant beds. And some of our lines have been broken over time, and we just need an overhaul for the sprinkler system. It makes the garden ladies really happy when they don't have to drag hoses all over the library grounds to keep our grounds looking so nice. And I like to keep library volunteers happy.
Absolutely, that's very important.
It is very important. They do a lot of work to keep our grounds looking lovely. And so that's, our contribution is making sure that they have what they need to do that work. So we'll be starting that as soon as we can. Also, we have a native plant bed that's behind the shed that's in the parking lot. So it faces 3rd Street. And it's been, it's a labor of love, and it has been something that hasn't really had a lot of maintenance for several years now. And some local folks have adopted it, and we'll be adding some new plants to that bed. Our new facilities manager, John, will be installing a rainwater harvesting barrel on the garage that will collect rain to help water those beds. It's always been a difficulty in getting those beds really well established, is that water, there's just no close water. So we're going to be doing that this year. And the parking lot beds, I know they look awful, and my apologies for last year. We were letting them go wild to see what might grow there well. And so we've got some ideas. We've got some plants ordered, and they will be getting a facelift as well. So really looking forward to having those beds kind of spiffed back up a little bit. And some really exciting, so another topic that's really exciting is down in our youth services department, we have a mural that's currently being installed. And this is down in past the boat desk. We have a little play area. And that is getting a mural by artist Chelsea Stafford. She's the artist who did the mural that's on the back of the library shed. That is in honor of the water keepers and grandmother Josephine. She also did the mural that's on Front Street off of the Loyalties building. So she's quite talented.
Yeah, she's a beautiful artist. She really is.
It's just fantastic. So downstairs in the children's room, we'll be getting a lighthouse and some water and fish and other watery Great Lakes themed artwork on the walls. And that mural is being funded by our friends of the library. So that is very exciting. It's exciting that the friends and their bookstore and hopefully book sales coming back this fall.
Hooray!
Yay, I know, so exciting. So all of that, generates, all that work that they do generates funding that can go towards things that we need here at the library. Our adult programming gets some of that money, and Marty's familiar with that.
Yes.
Supports youth programming, but then also just some of these specialty projects that really take money that's not available in our operating fund and does great things with them. So
we love the friends. We do love our friends. Yes, absolutely. Wow.
So that's what I have.
All right. Well, it's all about keeping Peter White Public Library beautiful inside and outside. And anybody we're going to be hopefully doing some outside programming this summer. So, people are going to be able to come and see, all those beautiful, flower beds and everything, and really, really appreciate all of those improvements. So, yeah, that's really exciting. So, Andrea, that's the word from this week's library nerd, Andrea Ingmire, director of Peter White Public Library. So this, Andrea has there's lots of different services at Peter White, programming to offer and everything to patrons. But the thing that everyone associates with libraries is of course, books. And I always love to get recommendations from a fellow library nerd, which brings us to our next segment.
Off the shelf.
So, Andrea, what have you been reading?
Well, I read a lot of cookbooks. I love cookbooks, and I can talk about cookbooks, and I often do for hours. But I'm not going to talk about cookbooks today because I also want to talk about the fact that I'm in a book club. I'm actually in 2 book clubs, but one of them is about cookbooks. It's our Tasty Reads book club that we have here at the library. So I'm not going to talk about that one, but I'm involved in a personal book club also with some friends. And the thing I love about book clubs is it forces me to read things that I wouldn't pick up on my own. So, and it gives me a deadline, which is also helpful for me because
deadlines are so good.
I'm one of those weird people that it doesn't bother me at all to read a book for 6 months. I have no problem with that. I know that drives some people crazy, but I have about 10 books going at a time, and I'll just pick up whichever one is of interest to me and read that for as long as I am feeling inspired to do so, and then I might put it down for a while. So deadlines are helpful for me. And the book that I just finished is called Devil in the Dark Water, and it's by Stuart Turton. I hope I'm saying his last name right, Turton. It's a mystery, but it also weaves in historical fiction, a little bit of horror, and there's some supernatural doings, obviously, with a title that has devil in it. Yeah. There's going to be something supernatural. So it's set in the 1600s in Batavia, which is now Indonesia. I had to look that up, on a merchant ship voyage to Amsterdam. So you leave from Batavia with 300 plus folks on this merchant ship. And as the book is taking off, there's this thing that happens at the docks that puts this ominous cloud around the voyage. But the voyage takes off anyway. And as you take off, you can smell the sea salt and the dirty sailors. The writing is it's really excellent. This is not a cozy mystery. It's not overly gory either. For me, it struck a pretty good balance between that. But certainly many of the scenes are grim. Conditions for the characters are really poor. I mean, after all, this is the 1600s on the high seas. And supplies were shorted because there was some huge thing that was brought on board. That's part of the storyline.
Wow.
I really liked the Sherlock Holmes feel of the novel. The main sleuths are, Sammy Pipps, who would kind of be the Sherlock character, and Errant Hayes, who's kind of the Holmesy character. However, Sammy Pipps is locked up. He's in confinement. So Holmes is really responsible for solving this mystery. And he has a failed attempt at doing this in the past, so he doesn't have much confidence. But fortunately for the story and the characters, Sarah, who is the wife of the Major General, she's not content sitting in her room and playing the good wife. So she kind of teams up with Errant, and then they really take on this mystery. So there's all these other delightful characters. You know how some books have characters that are just kind of despicable, but you can't help but like them a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of those in this book. There's definitely some characters you have no trouble hating, and you're just like, oh, they're awful humans. But there's quite a few where it's like, I don't know. I could like them, I could hate them. You go back and forth through the story. It's pretty twisty turny. So I really enjoyed it. As usual, I was wrong. I never pick out the whodunit. I'm never, ever, ever right.
I have a confession to make. I always read the last page of a mystery first.
Oh no!
I do.
That.
I can't stand it. I can't stand it. So I do that all the time, and it drives everybody crazy.
The advantage I can see to doing that is that then you pick up on all the nuances through the book as to how the signs are there, and you may not pick up on it if you didn't know. I can see an advantage.
That's the fun part for me. It's like, okay, I know this is, and then I'm seeing all the clues line up. But again, it sort of spoils it at the end when the big reveal comes. But I'm just not a person that is big fan of surprises. So I like reading that ending first.
Yeah. Well, up until I joined this book club, I honestly had read maybe 3 mystery books in my entire life. I just wasn't interested, really. But after joining this book club, and a few people in the club are like really big mystery buffs, Agatha Christie and Louise Penny being 2 of the favorites of the group. And so I was challenged to read more mystery, and I'm finding that I really enjoy it. I like the puzzle. I like looking back and seeing how the author was able to set things up without just showing us everything at once.
Yeah.
So it's been I always think it's fascinating how reading habits change over time.
Yeah.
As we grow and change,
and book clubs are really good at forcing you to read stuff that you would not normally pick up. So
absolutely.
My book club, I always reads Fanny Flagg, and I was never like a big Fanny Flagg fan. But now every July we come around. July is Fanny Flagg month. We always read Fanny Flagg, and I've actually come to enjoy her. So yeah. So Andrea, what was the title of the book and the author again?
So the title is Devil in the Dark Water, and the author is Stuart Turton.
Turton. So there you go. It sounds like it has a little bit for everybody. People who love historical stuff, people who love mystery, people who love weird characters and things like that. So
Yep.
yeah, it sounds like a great book. So there you have it. Andrea's word on what's good
Off the shelf. And we have come to the end of this time-traveling episode of Library Nerds with Words, with a throwback to the second episode of Season 1. I want to thank Andrea Ingmire, Director of Peter White Public Library, for agreeing to be that very first guest nerd on the podcast. Come back next week when I will be hopefully sitting down for a chat with Gayla Malherbe, poet, nerd, and organizer of the Teen Write On Writing Workshop series, taking place January through February 2024, right here at Peter White Public Library. Until that time, everyone, stay nerdy. Thank you for listening to Library Nerds with Words, Peter White Public Library's weekly podcast, giving you the word on what's cool at the library. The theme for the podcast is Happy Clappy by John Bartman, used courtesy of Pixabay. This episode was written and produced by Martin Acketts and sponsored by Peter White Public Library. Until next week, pick up a good book, listen to some good music, watch a good movie, attend a great event, and remember, library nerds are the coolest people around.